Hi guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Wild Eyed Diaries. Busy as always with Jerry currently in Madagascar, Marlon now back from Pantanal and heading off again on Sunday to Mana Pools and to Wangi. Alistair also heading off on Sunday to Botswana. So there's a lot going on, but still we've been able to put together quite an interesting episode. We've got an update from Mike, who's going up to Kenya next week as well to host one of our Mara Experience weeks. We also catch up with Trevor, who's going to be looking at some of the blog posts that have been done over the last week or so, touching specifically on some of the frequently asked questions on Safari and why choose a photographic safari. So some interesting stuff there as well. We've got an update from Johan when he was in Kruger, which is a couple of weeks ago. He's currently in Zambia, in South Luangwa. And then finally, I catch up with Adam Bannister around a recent trip that he did to Odzala. Now, as you know, we've got a safari running there, the first safari of its kind running there in February next year. So I caught up with him just to get a little bit more about the experience. So diving straight in, we're going to start off with Mike as he chats about his upcoming Masai Mara Experience Safari.
Hello everyone, I hope that you are doing well and that you've had an incredible week so far. I've been in office for 2 weeks, which has been great. This has allowed me to catch up on a lot of emails and back-end admin stuff that you don't see me doing too often. So it was great being in office and getting down to the nit and grit of admin, as they call it. But I'm very happy to say that I'm heading out on safari in the next couple of days. I head into Kenya. I fly out on the 9th of October into Nairobi, where I'll spend the night, and then the very next day I fly to the Masai Mara with the group of guests I'll be hosting. And the particular safari that I'll be hosting them on is one of our newer products called the Masai Mara Experience Safari. And this is going to be the first time I'm hosting this particular safari, and I'm very, very excited to get up there and get things going. And the reason why I'm so excited is because it is the Mara outside of the Great Migration or the peak safari period. And what I mean by this is that the mass herds of the Great Migration would have already started moving out. And this particular safari, the Masai Mara Experience Safari, is based around the pre and post peak season or migration season. But in saying this, I was up there not too long ago, and guys I've spoken to and members of our team who have recently been up there say that the herds are still within the triangle and on the border of Tanzania in mass numbers. So this year seems quite promising, and I'm pretty sure that we're still going to be experiencing the migration, if not the potential crossings, but definitely still see the mass herds in and around the Masai Mara late into October and potentially into November this year. The reason for this is because of massive rains in Tanzania earlier this year. Animals stuck around there quite a bit longer and only decided to move out quite a bit later. And therefore, I'm probably thinking that these animals are only going to leave the Mara later this year. And with the burns that took place in Tanzania, they're trying to hold the wildebeest there. There's also still a lot of food in the Mara Triangle, which also seems very, very promising. And hopefully this will also draw the mass herds back into the triangle. And yeah, it's going to be good. I'm hoping for some potential wildebeest crossings and zebra crossings once we get up there. But in saying all of this, most of the times out of this peak season, a lot of the time people believe that there is not much game or wildlife within the Masai Mara, which, yeah, they are absolutely mistaken. There is a lot of wildlife in this particular area throughout the year. Yes, the mass herds of hundreds of thousands of wildebeest and zebra aren't there, but there are still all the cats in the area, the elephants, the plains game, a lot of predator activity. The hippos stay in the river, the crocs stay in the river. So the area is absolutely teeming with an abundance of wildlife. As you will see in this video that I'm going to add right now, you will see that there is a hell of a lot to see in the Masai Mara outside of this peak or great migration season, if I may. And this takes place throughout the year. You'll see an abundance of animals, and I can say this with confidence because I host many safaris in the Masai Mara outside of this peak season. So obviously the Masai Mara Experience being one of them, but as well as big cats and tuskers. So I know that there's a lot of good wildlife to see within these areas. I would just recommend not traveling there during their long rains, so anywhere from March into May. Game's still there, but yeah, the accessibility to certain areas within the Mara due to the big rains and floods is not too great, so moving around in the area can be quite challenging. But what are the benefits of traveling to the Masai Mara outside of this peak or migration season? So a few that I want to point out is that one will get to spend more time in sightings, and the reason I say this is because there's a lot less vehicle pressure. So within the Mara Triangle, the wardens and the rangers are very strict and conservation savvy, which is great to see. They really care about the land they operate on and the land all those magnificent animals call home. So a lot less vehicle pressure, which then means we can spend a lot more time in sightings, spectacular game viewing, predators are in numbers, and one thing that really stands out for me is that the beautiful colors in these times of years are truly spectacular and breathtaking. The blues, the greens, yellows, oranges and reds makes for spectacular photography. And I'm sure most of you would know this, but recently this particular reserve, the Masai Mara, was named the best game reserve in the world. And I'm sure whatever I've just said now is backed by these words. They wouldn't have called it the best game reserve for nothing if it does not absolutely pump with great wildlife sightings and photographic opportunities throughout the year. And yes, this particular reserve does feature very, very high up on people's must-see destinations, or high up on those lists. And if you decide to join us in the future, a few highlights that I'd like to point out on this particular safari, the Masai Mara Experience, is that there are no single supplements. There's Wi-Fi available in the camp. There'll always be at least one wildlife photographic guide in camp. The camp is on the banks of the Mara River and truly the best way to experience the Masai Mara. There are only 3 guests, so a maximum of 3 guests per vehicle, which are 4x4 Land Cruisers. You will get to spend time, get to know, and obviously get to meet traditional Masai that work and manage our camp. And this particular safari is fully inclusive, so all meals, drinks, safaris, internal flights, laundries, park fees and so on are all included in this package, which is phenomenal. So whether you have visited the Masai Mara before, or many times before, or you just simply want to experience an incredible and iconic destination outside of the peak season, this particular safari will definitely showcase the magic of the East African plains, providing incredible photographic opportunities. And again, another benefit of having less vehicles around. But yeah, I do hope that you all have an incredible weekend. I've still got a bit of work to do before I head off, so best I say goodbye. But thank you for taking the time to tune into this week's episode. I hope that you've enjoyed this particular episode and my segments, and I do look forward to hosting you on a safari in the Masai Mara in the near future. Anyway, that's it for me this week. Have a good one, and bye-bye for now.
As you can see, the Mara is an incredible place. There is no bad time of year to be there, and with the recent fires that took place a couple of weeks ago, it seems as though the crossings are now starting to take place. So hopefully Mike and our guests that will be heading up there over the next month or so will be able to capture a couple of crossings, although that is certainly not the focus at this time of year. Right, next we're going to catch up with Al just before he heads out to Botswana.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of the Wild Eye Diaries hosted by Andrew. It's another general office update from me this week, or safari update should I say. I got back from the Masai Mara early hours of Wednesday morning, and so I spent yesterday and today in the office catching up on emails, catching up on guest requests, and basically just editing some good content that we've all been putting out. So the time's been quite limited in terms of being able to put something more concrete together. But I'll give you an update on what the Mara was like over the last couple of weeks. Grant, John and myself hosted an insurance corporate incentive group from Australia in our first week, which was absolutely fantastic. And then the second group with Jerry and Jono was one of our standard photographic safari offerings. And both weeks were treated to some fantastic sightings. And really, I think the key was patience in both weeks, where we waited 5, sometimes 6 hours at a potential river crossing. And sometimes it didn't pay off, but most of the time it did. We were treated to a couple of really good sightings in both weeks. But apart from the crossings, which of course was the focus, we were treated to some really good cat sightings as well. Female leopard and cub, multiple lion sightings, and of course all the other general game that comes with the Mara was really, really good. And I know I've spoken about it before, and multiple other guides have spoken about it as well, but the positioning of our Mara camp is so crucial. What tends to happen in the Mara, because of the big skies, especially when it's a cloudless day and blue skies, and the light tends to get quite harsh from pretty early on, around about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. The light is quite harsh and makes it very difficult to photograph. So to be able to find key subjects and photograph them early in the morning in golden morning light is absolutely crucial. And the position of our Mara camp, especially with the resident lion prides that are close by, means that on almost every single morning we had lions within 5 or 7 minutes from camp, meaning that we had photographs to subject to photograph in golden morning light, which makes our work a lot easier, and of course makes the guests very happy to photograph in golden Mara light. So that's really, really crucial. But like I said, a great 2 weeks. We really enjoyed the Mara, and I've been back in the office for a couple of days, and then I'm off on Sunday to Botswana, where I'll be hosting a 2-week mobile tented camp safari known as the Best of Botswana. 4 guests, a really exclusive safari, and we'll be going to some of the best destinations within Botswana, and hopefully getting to see some of the best wildlife that Botswana has to offer. I'm really looking forward to it, and I know my guests are too. 2 of the guests on the safari have actually been in the Mara with me last week, and so we're really looking forward to having another amazing experience together. But that's pretty much it from me. I'll be sharing a lot more content, both videos and pictures from the Mara, and then when I get back from Botswana, I'll be sharing updates from that safari as well. But otherwise, general update from the Mara, things were fantastic. Keep watching for more updates, and I'll share more updates from Botswana when I get back in the next couple of weeks. Once again, thanks for watching, and thanks Andrew for hosting the episode, and I'll catch up with everybody soon. Cheers for now.
So the 2-week journey that Alistair is on, it's a mobile safari. So they start off in Maun and make their way all the way through the Moremi Game Reserve, through the Kwai area, up to Savuti, and then finish off on the Chobe River in a bit of luxury on a houseboat. An incredible trip. I hosted the safari last year and we had some amazing sightings. So I'm very keen to see what Alistair and our guests come back with from that safari. We're going to move now into Trevor's insert for this week, where he catches up with some of the recent blog posts that have been posted on the Wild Eye blog.
Hello everyone, hope that you have had a productive week so far. I've been in the office the last week, so I've been getting a lot of admin done, working on a couple of new blogs which I'll get into shortly, and just in general catching up. Guys have been coming and going over the last week, coming back from safaris. Marlon's come back from the Pantanal. Andrew's been in Amana Pools. Alistair's been in the Mara. So there's a lot of coming and going, a lot of catching up to do with the guys, hearing about their experiences, their stories. And yeah, so in terms of myself and this segment this week, as opposed to giving a general update from the office, I thought I would just chat about some of the recent blog posts that have been put out. So myself and Mike, as well as Andrew, have been in the office for most of the last week, and there is some great new content that we are putting out onto the blog, some slightly different topics, and from my side I've based it on just a few of the things that I've experienced while out on safari, or topics such as patience, why choose a photographic safari. It's a question that I get asked quite a bit when out in the field, so I thought I'd elaborate a little bit more in the blog. And then also, having just returned from the Mara, my next safari, I head up to the Masai Mara again towards the middle to end of October for 2 weeks. I just thought I would discuss in a blog post what to do when shooting in harsh light. Now in the Mara, majority of the day, and it's not only the Mara that this happens, but majority of the day you spend out in the field looking for animals. Over the last couple of months, looking for crossings, And in terms of photography, it can get quite tricky when you're outside of that early morning, late afternoon period when you've got very ideal light. So I'll start off with that one. Shooting in harsh light, it is something that is quite tricky to do. It can, you do lose motivation, confidence. Out in the field, after 10, 11 o'clock, it starts to get quite bright. The light becomes very, very harsh. Lots of contrast, and can be quite tricky to manage in terms of photographs. So in this blog, I just discussed a few different areas that I use to help me when I'm out in the field, and also helping the guests that I'm with. And it's something simple like a black and white conversion. You know, when you take a picture in this harsh light, it can often look quite flat or quite dull, or slightly overexposed, and you can't quite adjust your camera correctly to get the ideal picture that you are envisioning in your mind. And black and white just assists you to use that contrast and that harsh light to your advantage. There's some high key images that you can play around with. You can also add intensity into an image if you use that contrast correctly. And I'll leave a link here just to our blog page or our website, where you can go and check out all these blogs and have a read. And if it is any of these topics is something that you really struggle with, or you just want something interesting to read, I suggest you go and have a look at it, read through it, and I'm pretty sure that you'll find some helpful information there. Another one I wanted to chat about, and I mean this is something that I had in my mind from my guiding days, and that is patience out in the field. You know, myself, pretty much like any other kid, I had very little patience, and it was something that I learned to deal with, and I learned to use to my advantage when I was guiding, and I'm still using it to this day. In this blog post, I used a example from my recent private safari to the Timbavati, where I hosted 2 guests at Kambaku Lodge in the Timbavati. And it's a simple example, but I think you'll get an idea of where I'm going with this, and how it can help you and benefit you, whether it's self-drive or whether it's on safaris that you go on. The example that I'm going to use was from one afternoon. So the morning we went out on safari, quite dark, gloomy, a little bit of wind, and we had a massive thunderstorm. So we actually came back a bit earlier from drive, and we decided, chatting to our guide Willem, that we were going to go out a little bit earlier in the afternoon. So in the morning they had found a female leopard with a kill, and we thought it would be a good idea just to go back there and assess it. We heard that she had a kill up in a tree, but now there's obviously a variety of different trees out in safari, so try not to get hopes up or guests' hopes up, because sometimes it is in very densely vegetated areas, and the reason for this is to prevent other predators such as birds of prey, so bateliers, tawny eagles, vultures, from noticing the kill, because as soon as they start coming down in numbers, that draws other predators such as hyenas, other leopards, lions. So you're never quite sure when you're going to a sighting with a leopard up in a kill, unless you've seen photos or you've chatted to the other guides and got an idea of where the kill is positioned. But we thought, because we had been out for so short in the morning, that we would try and maximize our time. It was also our last day in the Timbavati on safari, last full day, and we headed out at about 2 o'clock. Now by this time the thunderstorm had passed. It was very, very warm. And knowing that, we knew that we would get there, and most likely she would the leopard would be resting in the shade, or just hiding away and waiting for it to cool down a bit. So we headed out 2 o'clock, and on arrival to the last position, she was in a perfect marula tree, massive marula tree out in the open. It wasn't very densely vegetated around the tree, and she was in fact sitting in the tree close by to her kill. So great start, beautiful scene. Light was quite harsh, so not ideal for photographs, but we thought, we've got time, we're the only ones out in the field, let's sit, let's be patient, let's wait and see what she gets up to. Maybe she goes and feeds, maybe she comes down the tree, maybe she goes for a drink of water, but also maybe she just sleeps the whole afternoon. We had no idea when she had last fed, and so sitting there, we got a couple of shots. especially that kind of tree. Speaking about black and white earlier, in the harsh conditions, there wasn't any leaves on the tree. So where she was with the harsh light, it created good black and white images, which are very intense, very moody feel to them, lots of emotion. So we played around with a bit of that. And then sitting there, it all sounds great to sit with the leopard for an hour, 2 hours. And it really is. I mean, it's a privilege to be able to do that. But when the animal is passed out sleeping, doing absolutely nothing, and after 2 hours you just see an ear flick, it does start to get quite hard, and does test your patience. But while we were sitting there, we knew that other guides and that would obviously want to come into the sighting once they headed out on drive. But we started to discuss what kind of images we can get from this kind of sighting. And just looking at the tree, it had a very long tree trunk. As I mentioned, it was a perfect spot for her, so we would get some nice late afternoon light on her if she was lying in the tree. But the shot that I discussed with my guests, and a way to enhance the sighting in terms of a photographic point of view, would be to get this beautiful leopard coming down the tree. Beautiful, as I mentioned, long tree trunk, lots of time to get her coming down, and it's not an easy shot to get. There's quite a number of different factors that go into it, but once again, it's just looking for different photographic opportunities and how to enhance the sighting. And we had sat there for about 3 hours, and she still hadn't done too much, but we discussed it. Sit there patiently, wait. Normally if you are patient and you persevere, the rewards will come. And this is all the kind of stuff that we discussed on the vehicle, and it is very difficult when you're in that moment and you have that scenario to believe those words. But from my experience and my guiding experience, most often than not, it will pay off for you. So we sat there, still not much change. A couple of other guys wanted to come to the sighting, so we left briefly, went, had a drink stop, and obviously in this time things can change. She can get up, she can feed, she can come down the tree, she can go for a drink of water, and there's not much we can do. So we went, allowed the other guys to come in, have a look, and then they moved on, and we returned about 15-20 minutes later, and she was still up in the tree. Light's starting to get quite tricky, so in terms of keeping a fast shutter speed, we would have to push our ISOs up to freeze her coming down the tree. And sitting there, we discussed other photographic opportunities. So what was then clear to me was there was a beautiful big fork in the tree, and with the light starting to fade, the next best result would be for her to come down, pause in the fork of the tree, look at us, hopefully get a picture, and then have her coming down and try and get images of her coming down. If we got them, great, but knowing that now the shot in mind had changed to her in the fork of the tree. And everybody managed to get that shot, fortunately. I mean, literally as we arrived, we sat there for 10-15 minutes. She finished feeding up, she moved her kill, and then we thought, okay, she's going to come down the tree. And literally just after that, she came down to the fork of the tree, she paused, she looked towards us in the last fading light, and then descended down the tree. So absolutely incredible sighting. She did exactly what we wanted her to do in the end. Like I said, it wasn't easy when you're sitting there in the baking heat. There's no shade for you, so you're feeling the wrath of the sun. She's passed out doing nothing, and all you see is her ear flick. It really takes a lot of patience, but if you can envision specific things in a sighting happening, it's always worthwhile spending a bit of time waiting it out, have patience, persevere, and the results will come. And it doesn't always go that way, but you're giving yourself the best chance, because I believe if you're sitting with an animal or a specific subject, and there is potential like her coming down the tree and getting the shots that you guys are after, there's no point in going and looking for something that you may not find. So if you've got the opportunity to sit and be patient, it's the best way to go about it, and you will be rewarded at some point. So yeah, those were just the 3 blogs that I put out this last week. As I mentioned, they are great reads. Mike also put a couple of great blogs out. Is the dull scene really a dull scene is one of them. Negative space versus wasted space, how to use it. That's all working with composition, and then best camera or camera gear that you can have. So there's a variety of different blogs out at the moment on the blog that have just come out this last week. Great, interesting reads, and I'm pretty sure that if you take a bit of time, go through them, grab a cup of coffee, you will be able to pick up bits and pieces here and there that are going to better your photography. And from my side, that's pretty much it for this week. I hope that you have all had a wonderful week and that you have a great weekend ahead. For now, I'm going to say cheers and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye, guys.
As always, great content coming out onto the blog. If you're ever in need of some inspiration or just looking to grow yourself photographically, then do head over there. It's very easy to find on our website and it's updated very regularly. So keep your eyes on there. If you've got suggestions and ideas of things that you would like us to feature or have a question on a specific topic, feel free to drop us a line. All the comment sections are open there, or you can send us an email. Up next, we're going to catch up with an insert that Johan recorded a couple of weeks ago whilst he was in Kruger, just reminding you now that he's currently on safari in Zambia.
Hi guys. Okay, so just finished the Kruger Photo Safari at Camp Shavu, wrapping up today, and I thought for this week's entry of the diaries, I'll just chat to you from here. Unfortunately, I'd love to do it outside, but it's very windy, so I don't think you'll be able to hear anything that I'm saying. But 5 nights at Camp Shavu, again, absolutely phenomenal. Before the trip, I spoke about how not every single safari is ever the same, and this case was no different. You know, usually at Camp Shavu in the past, we've had some amazing lion sightings, usually lions all over the place. And in this case, although the lions proved to be a little bit harder to find, we've had some phenomenal leopard viewing, pretty much every day, on the ground, in trees, and then this morning to finish off, a beautiful female leopard in a fever tree, which I've been waiting 12 years to see that, and we were absolutely blown away by the amount of good game that we saw. As I mentioned, lions were a little bit harder to find this time around, but we did have a collision of the 6 males. If you remember, maybe a few months ago there were 8, now 6 male lions. I think the 2 have split off somewhere else, but still to have 6 male lions in front of camp, so just behind me at the waterhole, calling from early in the morning, and then literally just driving out of camp to the waterhole to see them was truly spectacular. Spent a good 3 hours with them, watched them interact, had a drink at the waterhole. So yeah, I mean, I totally blown away. And the more I come to this place, to Camp Shavu, the more I sort of fall in love with the place. I think it's a fantastic destination. Probably for me one of the most underrated properties in South Africa, and a very good option if you're looking for a bolt-on safari. So either maybe pre-migration or post-migration. I think this destination, especially September, October, it really is phenomenal. Now, as I mentioned, it's also a lot drier this year than maybe previous years or previous months, and the waterhole hasn't got a lot of water in it at the moment, but we still had a lot of game coming to drink. Elephants coming and going daily, lots of rhinos, amazing general game, giraffes, kudus, waterbuck, impala, wildebeest, zebras, all coming to drink, and it's literally on your doorstep. So really phenomenal. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Truly blown away by this place. If you want to get to this destination, please get in touch, and we can then recommend the best months for you. But from my experiences so far this year, I would go for this time of the year, mid to end of September, maybe beginning October. Yeah, you won't be disappointed. With the hot days, the bush is also a lot drier, so it's easier to find game. And as I mentioned, with hardly any water around, the only water access points are here and then at the river, which is probably, as the crow flies, maybe about 4 or 5 k's away. So guys, that is it from my side for this week's diaries. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I will finish off my insert with a few highlights, few special moments from this particular safari. Hope you guys enjoy it. Until next time, cheers, have a good one.
utakatsonga untwanga kukwane ya timala se to baleka sweswi se ti vone nambele kufika stations nambele kufika nento yakutoba mnanzi la nento yakutoba mnanzi ngakukhala we did that last night.
Kruger National Park, even as a national park, it really does have some incredible sightings to offer, as you've seen from Johan's insert. The private concession down in the south of Kruger there, especially at this time of the year when there's no other water around apart from that dam that's right in front of Camp Shawu, really does deliver some spectacular sightings and great photographic opportunities. Finally, to bring this episode to an end this week, I caught up with Adam Bannister, who's currently based at Masai Mara, but recently was in Odzala National Park and experienced the same itinerary that we're going to be running in February next year. There are still 2 places available on this incredible experience, and if this is something that has piqued your interest in the past, now is the time to do it. Find out a little bit more about Odzala as I chat to Adam Bannister. Right, Adam, so how's it going, man? First of all, where are you and what on earth is that behind you on the wall?
Good evening. I'm currently in Masai Mara in Ngama, where I work.
Yeah.
That is an elephant collar, the GPS receiving elephant collar. It's one of the ones that belongs to the Mara Elephant Project. It's old and obviously not in current use, but it's one of the things that we're looking to raise money to, is to recollar a couple of problematic elephants in the Mara. So that's just a talking piece, really.
Brilliant. Well, there you go. Adam, I mean, like I first came into contact with you. I know you've been a lot of work with big cats, and that's been a passion of yours. And I know we chat a lot about your time up in India. I know you spent a lot of time in Londolozi and in the Pantanal, and now all of a sudden you've just come back from the Congo. How on earth did that all kind of pan out? And yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so big cats historically over the last almost 13 years, big cats have been my main driver. But I didn't want to exclude areas that didn't have cats. And in saying that the Congo has cats, we actually did hear a leopard calling. We never saw a leopard, but we heard one calling. So I wouldn't not go to an area because of the big cats. What led me to the Congo was to go to a place that the majority of people think is almost taboo and out of bounds and too dark and too dangerous. And I am a big seeker of proper wilderness, untouristed wilderness. And that's what led me to the Congo.
Not many of those places out there left anymore, are there?
No. The most remote I've ever been was last year. I was in Manu National Park in Peru. That was as remote as I think you could possibly get at the moment. Yeah. So there are not many left. And usually, what I'm a big fan of going to places before they're established, when they're actually a bit more difficult. I'm not a big fan. I'm a photographer. I would never call myself purely a photographer, but I don't like to go to places when the animals are already habituated, when the paths are already well trodden. I like to go to places and actually contribute towards the habituation, towards the making the trails, towards that kind of stuff. And then post that, other people will come in and they'll do their thing and they'll probably get better photos. That's fine. But I like
the experience side. That, I often say that I was born, too late. You go back a couple of hundred years, that raw, authentic African experience, and there's something to be said about that as well.
It's exactly that. It's in a day and age where I seek wilderness and seek those as much about experiences as I am about animals. So, for example, it doesn't matter really what you see. It's how you're doing it. That's really what drives me, and the quest to try and get to those few spots that are left in this world. And the Congo is one of them, and certainly one of the most enjoyable, adventurous, but comfortable adventurous trips I've ever been on.
Yeah. So I think your time is very similar to the itinerary that we're going to be running in February and that I'm going to be hosting up there. And again, you know, this was, I remember years ago when this particular property, Odzala, in Odzala Photographic National Park was first on the market. It was run by Wilderness Safaris. It's since now changed hands, and it's with the Congo Conservation Corporation, I think it is.
Congo Conservation Company, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just an incredible piece of Africa. And the first thing is, you know, people think about Congo, and there's a distinction that needs to be made there between the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Two Congos.
Yeah.
If I were in charge of tourism for the Republic of Congo, I would change the name of the country. Because quite literally, you've got the Republic of Congo and you've got the Democratic Republic of Congo, and to all people, they are just Congo. And it's quite fun to bounce the name around Congo, but really, it's a geographical area. It's the Congo Basin. It's a geographical area. It's two countries, one of which is in trouble, and the other which is doing really quite well. And the one that Odzala is in is the one that's doing really quite well. And the first thing that'll absolutely blow your mind when you go there is the state of the city, the Brazzaville, the capital.
So that's where the whole itinerary starts, and you fly out of Brazzaville right up north into Odzala. So
Brazzaville is similar. It reminded me in some ways to Kigali in Rwanda, in that it's an African country that is definitely African, but it's clean. It feels safe. It feels like it's controllable. It feels nice size. And then you look across the Congo River, which for me was always a dream. I never imagined I would ever see the Congo River, but you look across this river that must be 1.5 kilometers wide, maybe even more. And on the other side, you have Kinshasa, which is one of the most overwhelming and daunting cities that I will probably never go to. And then it is a different world. You've got 18 million people living in Kinshasa, and you've got something like 1 million living in Brazzaville. And you just wonder why on earth everyone isn't swimming across the river to get to Brazzaville, because it works really quite well. So it's a very soft introduction to a country that in your mind will be quite a difficult space.
Sure. So flying out of Brazzaville, flying up north into Odzala, I mean, I'm going to be sharing little bits and pieces of the video clip that you put together whilst you were up there as well. I mean, just flying in there, I mean, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, so the most amazing thing is flying over the Congo River. I mean, that is one of the world's great rivers to see. We just walked a little bit along the riverbanks before we flew, and just to see what people are doing on that river is extraordinary. The actual flight is spectacular, and you very quickly get out of any human life and you start getting into forests. But what's surprised me, I'm very well experienced in Amazon, so in South American forest, where it's just blankets and blankets of forest. The Congo is more forests, and then these islands of savanna. So as you're flying, you've got trees, and then suddenly it's just open grasslands, and then trees, and then grasslands. And it's hugely exciting because you're going north, you're going about an hour and a half, I would guess, about an hour and a half flight. And you're wondering how on earth you're going to land in amongst all this. But then all of a sudden you come down, it's an extraordinary place to put an airstrip. They've done very well there. And you land, and then you open the door, and you are suddenly in the Congo. And it's a forest, but it hasn't got the difficulty of the Amazon. It's got the beauty, but it's not something. You don't open the door and go, shit, I'm really in trouble here, I'm out of my depth. You go, hang on, I could do this. I can access this rainforest. It's doable, and it's beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, those grasslands and open areas, and you mentioned hearing leopard out there, and I know that hyena and that sort of thing have been seen and documented in there as well. It's those kind of ecotones and those little mosaic kind of patches that must just add such an incredible diversity. But then also from a kind of biological side of things, having these little pockets and islands of species just nested all over the place. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, very, very diverse. And the birding changes all the time. So you go from a savanna where you've got certain birds, and then all of a sudden you come into a forest and it changes. I wasn't there long enough nearly to come to grips with the vegetation, with the bird life, all that was going on. I took this more as an experience to just try and be overwhelmed, allow myself to be overwhelmed. And then I also was continually comparing it to South America, be it good or bad. Having spent so much time of my life in Brazil and Peru, I was looking more just about not trying to specify what the vegetation was called, but more like, oh, that's the role it's playing in a system that I'm familiar with, but on another continent.
Sure. So then the first couple of nights of your journey, you guys went to Ngaga camp?
Yep.
And so this is the camp where they trek habituated groups of Western lowland gorillas, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, first of all, have you trekked gorillas before, and how does this compare, and what was your experience like?
Okay, so prior to this trip, I'd never seen a great ape. I'd never seen a gorilla. I've always been a little bit swayed off, one, by the price of gorilla permits, and two, by the fact that they are so seemingly, in Rwanda, Uganda, they seem to be so relaxed that you sit right next to them, and that didn't sit too well with me. So when I heard about the Western lowland gorilla and the fact that it was in the process of being habituated and they still were relatively, well, completely wild, that excited me. So I flew into, we landed, and then you've got a bit of a drive to get to the camp, and from the camp then we overnighted. The next morning you head off and you go looking for these gorillas. It's tough. It's tough, but it's certainly not too tough. It's nicely tough. And the one thing that surprised me was that they asked us to wear masks, which first I was like, doesn't really make sense, but I understand why they're doing it. They're really trying to protect this gorilla species, of which there's not many left at all, and anything that humans might have might pass on to the gorillas. So you wear the masks when you come into close contact with them. But the first sighting I had of one was a very brief one at first, because it was sitting right by the path. And that moment that you see a gorilla for the first time is extraordinary. And then when you realize that you actually have them all around you and they're in the trees and not on the floor. So I was kind of, all the photographs I've ever seen of gorillas have been on the floor. Yeah, sure. These gorillas are tree gorillas. They're living up there. And so to see something like when you see a big silverback up in the top of a tree, it's like looking at something the size of an adult male human, high up in a tree, and you see the way he's moving around, and he's strangely human, but so much more, mobile than we are. And yeah, extraordinary. It wasn't what I thought, because I was expecting a ground gorilla, but almost all the time we spent with them, they were up in the trees doing a lot more than I think the gorillas in Rwanda and Uganda do, because these gorillas are feeding a lot more. They're moving a lot more in the canopy. Yeah. Yeah, we did two. So you do one in the first morning, and then they do it. You walk. They've got three families that they're working with. Two are used with guests, and the third is not. The third is used with researchers as a control. So they're trying to evaluate the impact that the guests are having. They have a very different outlook to the Rwandan Ugandan ones, in that they don't want the gorillas to come and be sitting right next to you. Yeah. They want the gorillas to be comfortable with you being around, but they want them to continue doing their thing. So you don't get as close. You're not going to get for me, it was more gorilla in landscape, in environment, than those close-up facial shots. I had a 70 to 200, which I would say is probably at least, 2.8, but too short if you're wanting those close ones. I had to embrace that and go like, well, I brought the wrong lens, so let me just enjoy taking a gorilla in the forest.
Can I ask, not being able to get as close and kind of having to observe, did it add to the experience? Or you almost feel like you're a voyeur, you're just peering into this world, and you're not actually part of it. There's no whilst they may know that you're there, you're not impacting on that behavior at all. You're just there and you're observing a moment.
Yeah, you go through. I think you go through two phases. The first one is that you feel, well, a couple of phases, but the first one is you're a little bit overwhelmed. You've seen a gorilla. The second one is you start to become a little bit frustrated that you're not closer, and you think, I want to be closer. But then the third one is when you realize that it's actually really cool that you're not closer, and you just kind of sit down and just watch. And they definitely do their thing. They're well aware of you. They look at you, but they're of a distance that you don't feel you're intruding. It's a different experience to anything that I've ever done.
Brilliant. Yeah. And how long were you with each group for?
So roughly an hour. Their guidelines are, once you see the gorillas, roughly an hour, but they don't say start and stop. What they do is they kind of say, well, you saw it for 10 minutes, then they disappear, and then you find them again, and they roughly add it up. It's certainly not, there isn't the pressure. There isn't the pressure because it's so remote, because there's so few people going there. It isn't the start, stop, your watch is going now. It's more like it probably should be, and more like it probably was in Uganda and Rwanda many years ago.
And one of the other things that's really appealed to me about this gorilla experience is that it's not just gorillas. And so when you're back at the lodge, you know, there's still a lot around there. There's a number of different primate species around, night forest walks, and just it seems like you've got this incredible blanket of opportunities just surrounding the camp, which in itself looks amazing. Did you guys do some night walks and that sort of stuff, picking up on the smaller things like the fungus and the insects and the plants, and it just looks as though it's incredible.
So one thing which was exciting was we heard chimpanzees almost every day. Okay. We didn't see, but we heard them, which was wonderful. The night stuff is quite special. We went out on. We didn't do a night walk. What we did was a night drive, and we must have got most of the bush baby, the galago species that you could see in the area. We must have got them in about a 2-hour night drive, and unusual things like pouched rats that I didn't even really know what they were. And you've got these huge rats, and you've got bush babies up in the trees, and really quite special stuff that you wouldn't see. We even got a view of a chameleon, which apparently in that system is very, very difficult to see. So the nighttime stuff is special. If you get lucky and see a chimp, that must be an extraordinary experience. I would not put any money on seeing the chimps, but to hear them is wonderful. I think that's a long-term goal for them to try and habituate some chimps, but that'll take a while.
Brilliant. And then, so from there, in our itinerary, we've then started to move back down south towards more of the Bai system, which, again, this is one of the key features of this whole area of the Congo, I think, is these Bais. Tell us a little bit about your game viewing experience there. I mean, some of the things are the forest elephant, things like bongo, buffalo, giant river hog. It's just a whole different world out there, isn't it?
Yeah, so the first cool thing to mention though is, so after the 2 gorilla treks and the couple of nights there, you move back up. So you're the furthest away at that stage that you'll get. Then you move back up more towards the heart of the park, and that drive is stunning. That's going through a massive mixture of vegetation. We had an incredible experience there where we were charged by a silverback in the car, and completely non-habituated gorilla that probably doesn't see many people at all. And the sound was extraordinary. I've been charged by numerous big cats in my time, but never a sound like that. Wow. So we had that amazing experience on the way up to the next camp. And that's where the Bai is, which you're talking about. And it is the most picturesque place ever. It's extraordinary what they've done. It's basically just a raised camp with boardwalks in between each little kind of hut. Beautiful communal area, and you're overlooking this, what essentially I would call a swampy grassland in amongst the forest. I don't know if that's the real definition of Bai, but it's essentially about half a foot to a foot deep in all places, and it's just grass. And there, that's where you get extraordinary views of buffalo, which it's a very different look to the buffalo that we're used to. This is the forest buffalo, much smaller, much more cow-like, much prettier, certainly much prettier. So you'll see buffalo all the time, and the ones around the camp are relatively relaxed. They're still are wild by all means, but they're more relaxed than the ones you're going to see later on whilst you're walking. The other thing, which is probably the most special, is the elephants coming in. They mine the clay on the bottom of the Bai. So what they do is they come in and they use their trunk and they blow air, and they're blowing away the silt so they can get to whatever the clay is, or the mineral in the clay at the bottom, and then they're eating that. And they usually do that in the late evening or through the night. And so while you're sleeping in your room, you hear this bubbling, blowing sound, and then you hear the swishing of the elephants as they go through the water. Often you can't see them, but you know that there are big big herds around there. We had, what we had was quite fun. We had, one of the guys had a pair of binoculars that had infrared on it, so we could the FLIR, and you could watch from a distance. You could just see a whole family of this red, heat signature of these elephants moving through. So that is very special. It's a very much an audio experience if you can't see at night. They're very determined to not scare those elephants off. So they don't put any lights on them at night or anything. So it's, once the sun's gone, that's it. You're basically just listening to what's going on. But they're all around you, and you sit there on the beautiful deck and you're just listening to these elephants blowing water.
Magic.
What else would you say? There's a lot of kind of bushbuck. The Sitatunga around there as well. Bongo is one that we tried very hard. We saw tracks of. We didn't get lucky. No bongo in the Congo for us, but they are there. And for me, what was more special than, and once you've got those main core animals, the big mammals rather, you then start to look at the monkeys, and then you start to look at the birds. And the birds are what really are quite extraordinary. I mean, to see a flock of African grey parrots in the wild, for me, the only thing like it was when I went to South America for the first time and I saw a macaw flying over the Amazon River. Yeah. And I was like, the only macaw I'd ever seen had been in a cage in a pet shop. Yeah. And it's the same. The only African grey parrot that I'd ever seen was in a pet shop in Sandton in Johannesburg. Yeah. And to suddenly see a flock of, a couple of hundred of them fly overhead was a pretty cool experience. Yeah. So the bird life starts becoming very special there as well. Yeah.
I believe good numbers of green pigeons and that sort of stuff coming down to those bars. As well.
Green pigeons in the thousands. Yeah. In the thousands, yeah. I think we have 7 nights or so, we must have got to just over 210 species or so. But that we did have an exceptional, we had 2 exceptional birders that are in a league that is comparable really to most people. Yeah. We were trying to discover new birds for the whole of Republic of Congo. So that's the level that we were at. But I would say that happily in your time, if you're just a keen or average to keen birder, you should get about 100, 150 in that region. But the thing is, there'll be a lot of very special birds in amongst that.
And talking about experiences, I mean, once you're down at Lango, walking through these bays, so the activities there, I mean, from canoeing, walking, there's still boats, power boating, and that sort of stuff around there as well. Just you immerse yourself in that region.
So it's the way to embrace this place is more of think of it as an expedition, and expedition of experiences, and get your head off the pressure of the gorilla, the elephant, the buffalo, and more into the experiences. And the fact that you can walk in water, I mean, I've always been very cautious of water because water is dangerous. Water's got snakes and crocodiles and all that. This water is completely different. It's about a foot. It's about a foot deep and it's clear, and you can see what's coming. You see the buffalo, you see the elephant a long way away, so you don't get into that tight situation when you're in the water. And yeah, to walk in water knee deep and sometimes waist deep, it's one of those things that you've got to jump over the cliff in order to get there. It takes a lot of courage to get there, but once you're in it, once you're experiencing that, that's when Odzala becomes at its best, is when you embrace that. If you hold back and you go, oh, the water, I'm not so sure about the water, it's a difficult place. But once you go, I'm in it.
Thinking, whoa, hang on, this is now getting a little too adventurous. I'm going to try and insert that clip where I see you guys walking through that beautiful section there. I mean, it's quite stable underfoot, and it's not muddy and boggy, and so it's a bit like watching people when it starts to rain. Everyone kind of dashes inside. You don't want to get wet, but once you actually start to embrace it, it's beautiful.
Yeah, once you're wet, it's wonderful. And the substrate is very fine little pebbles and sand. So you can even walk barefoot, which I find extraordinary. Again, coming from the Amazon, where you would, if you took your shoes off and you walked into the Amazon 10 meters, you would be in trouble. Versus this, you could literally take a whole day walk without shoes on. So we started talking about it as being the friendly forest and the very forgiving forest, because the substrate is so is so decomposed and so gentle and so soft and wet that it actually isn't really bad. I personally wouldn't walk barefoot, because purely in my mind thinking that if there was one branch or one bone fragment or one anything, it just makes it a little bit difficult. It could ruin the rest of the trip. So what I found myself wearing was just a pair of shoes, trainers, and they get wet, and that's fine. And they get wet every single day, and you put them out in the evening, they get dry, and then the next day they're wet, and you're literally walking in water that's a foot deep.
Yeah. So for someone who's watching this thinking, this sounds great, but insects walking through water and that sort of stuff, someone who's on the edge of saying that this sounds like an adventure I could push myself into, but I'm not too sure, what would you say to them to kind of, is this for everybody? Who shouldn't be out there? And how would you comfort someone who's kind of on that edge?
Okay. Firstly, it isn't for everybody. It isn't. If you're looking for comfort, then no. If you're looking for guaranteed big animals falling out the trees, then no. It is comfortable. The camp is very comfortable, completely comfortable. And it's incredible that you can go for a walk in the forest and return and have an ice cold gin and tonic or an ice cold beer and have a very good meal. The food was delicious, absolutely delicious. But when you're out there, it's not like sitting on the back of a game drive car with your guide just driving around and you can just lean back and you actually have to put the time and the effort in. You actually have to walk those miles, and you have to do that. So if you're at all hesitant, then I would say rather no, because if you're going to do this, you must do it properly. It is an exceptional experience, but when you're there, you are there. You're in the thick of things. You can very easily imagine what it must have been like, many, many years ago. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. It's what it is. So in terms of the insects, I was very, very pleasantly surprised. Again, I went there expecting, Amazon terror, the reign of terror, basically. And it doesn't really happen. The gorillas, you get sweat bees. Sweat bees are, they're non-biting, but they're highly annoying, and they will appear and they will get into every kind of little place that they can. And actually the way that you're getting close to a gorilla is you usually can smell them, because they smell a bit, and you start getting surrounded in sweat bees. But those you can wear a little head kind of netting kind of thing, or you just take it as it is. If you get upset about it, if that kind of angers you that there are little bees on you, then no, it's not the right place. But if you can put up with that, it's an exceptional thing. And those insects are what's kept people out. And that's the way I always look. That's the way I looked at all rainforests, was that if rainforests were easy to live in, then the rainforest wouldn't exist anymore.
But like fly in a lot of areas in Africa, and how they've kept areas, completely wild by livestock.
Exactly. And so mosquitoes weren't too bad. Sweat bees were only bad around certain areas, and they're not bees. They're just sweat. They're not biting at all. Down by the water, you wouldn't hang out on the beach kind of areas, because there's sandflies and that. But when you're walking, absolutely no issue. So insects weren't really too bad, but it is an experience. It's wet, it's sandy, it's muddy, but you do have hot showers. You do have an ice cold beer when you come back. It's not like you're camping. It's not like you're having to go and have a bucket shower afterwards. You've got a hot water shower.
And it's certainly, it's not a cheap exercise, but when you think about the logistics of running camps anywhere, never mind, a remote forest like this, but also then the experiences that these guys are delivering, and the standard of accommodation, and also I think importantly the contribution to conservation. I was really excited to hear about the research that was being done on these western lowland gorillas, and how I think it's Sabine Plattner, how her organization and everything is getting involved in really claiming back parts of Odzala and really trying to preserve the heritage of the park.
So two things on that. One, I spent a lot of last year trying to set up tourism in Manu in Peru, in a similar location, as isolated, and it was too difficult. We couldn't do it. So anything that was going to be there was always going to be expensive, because even just to get a basic meal into in there would be hard. To get a bed, try getting a bed into that area even. So what they've achieved there is exceptional. It's truly exceptional. The fact that there is a comfortable camp in the middle of the Congo Basin is exceptional. And what Sabine Plan has done there is, phenomenal. If it doesn't work, then nothing will work. And that for me is the reason I started getting involved in it. I was like, well, if she can't do it and if her team can't do it, then we're going to lose the Congo Basin. Well, that part, we're going to lose Odzala, because this is as good as you could possibly get in that environment. And support what people are doing to conserve an area, because if that fails, the alternative is logging and bushmeat and gone. And that's where we're at. And that places in Africa are. You've either got to go off the beaten track, get slightly uncomfortable, pay a bit of money, but to support them, or we turn our backs and go, you know what, this isn't for us. But then you must know that those places are going to disappear.
Yeah, and I think coming back to where we all started is, and this is before you start to take in the difference in names between the countries, and that these guys are already on the back foot because of the negative connotations and associations with the Congo and with that area in the Democratic Republic. It's it's interesting. Well, I'm certainly very excited to get up there. Adam, thank you again for your time and your input. And quickly, just tell us, I mean, you guys are doing quite a bit with you're involved in the greatest Masai Mara competition. I know we've got a couple of guests who've traveled with us who are involved there as well, and a couple of our guides in the running. It's been a great year for you guys, hey?
Yeah, so basically we in summary, we're trying to show the world what the world should already know, which is the fact that you don't just need to come to the Masai Mara for the migration. You don't need
more than just the migration.
There is more than just migration, and so the way to do that was for us to show imagery from around the world, from around the Mara, all year round. So we incentivize people to send us the images by creating a competition, and that is what we call the greatest Masai Mara photographer of the year. And the guys at Wild Eye have been hugely supportive of it. And you've got a photographer who's won the months of February and June. So at the end of the year, he's got a big chance of winning a very large prize, and really going towards a good cause. Because not only is it trying to change the misconception that the world has of the Mara, but it's also trying to get exposure for a couple of organizations that are doing work in the Mara that no one will ever find out about otherwise. I mean, there's a lady here who spends all her time trying to get the local Masai people to have wire bomas rather than the traditional wooden bomas, to try and stop the lions going in and stealing the cattle and the goats and all that. Her entire life is dedicated towards that, because she knows that if lions break into the boma, the locals will kill the lions, which is understandable. That's their livelihood. So she's dedicated her life to building these bomas. So one of the ways that we help her is that if you want to enter this competition and you want your entry fee, your $20 entry fee to go to her, it will go to her. And we've identified six groups like that. And it's fantastic. So it's raising some money, it's raising awareness, and it's creating great content to show the world what the Mara has.
Brilliant. I think it's been a massive success in the first year, and I'm very excited to see what you guys are going to get up to in the second year and how we can support you there. And thanks again for your time, mate. I really, really appreciate it.
Most welcome.
That's a wrap from this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. It's a fairly lengthy episode, but hopefully you'll find great content and value in everything that we've kind of put together for you. That's it from me for this week. We will catch up with you guys in the new week. Cheers. Bye, everyone. Say goodbye.
Bye.